Hey class, hope everybody's doing well today. We are in week 2, talking about church leadership and just the kind of early foundations of church leadership. And like most topics I find myself getting into, I found myself down sort of a rabbit trail, which was quite interesting, and honestly love doing these kinds of topic or studying these kinds of topics. Because of the fact that I oftentimes find myself in rabbit trails, which I think just kind of opens up the world to the topic that we're talking about, which in this case is church leadership. And, to kind of talk through the first question, what is the biblical basis of the 3 orders of church leadership using scriptural evidence? Like I said, found myself in a little bit of a rabbit trail and kind of comparing and contrasting the 2 views. Well, really there's more than 2, but kind of the 2 main views, which is the 3 office view and the 2 office view, and finding evidence for both. I don't think I'm comfortable enough yet to say I fully believe in one of these views, one of these formats, but it was quite interesting learning kind of the differences between the 2 and the basis between the 2. But as far as the 3 office view goes, or the 3 orders of church leadership goes, interestingly enough, this is not the foundation of where this came from, but again, in my study, learning that John Calvin was actually one of the ones who kind of held this view and implemented this view of having a pastor / minister in a separate office of elder. And I think to first understand kind of what the debate or conversation is really it's between deacons, which honestly deacons aren't getting talked about enough in my opinion, but if there are 3 separate roles, or if there are 2 roles, and the 3 separate roles being between deacons, elders, and pastors, and the 2 being between deacons and then elders and pastors sharing responsibilities, or essentially doing the same thing. And you can find lots of different things on why each is right and whatnot. And like I said, I don't think I'm comfortable enough fully yet to say that I believe that this is the one, but the basis, at least for the 3 office view, like I said, John Calvin is someone who held this and implemented this in the church, but the reality is that this goes all the way back to even the Old Testament, and that's where kind of a lot of the basis come from, what it seems like. And essentially, the 3 office view looks back to the Old Testament. Like I said, it looks back to the requirements and the role of an Old Testament elder, and then uses that as the basis of what a New Testament elder is responsible for and what they're doing in office and in the seat that they're sitting in. And you can find examples of this in Romans chapter 12, 7 through 8. It talks about this phrase, the one who leads, the elder being the one who is leading. And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 28, the elder is the one who's administrating. And again, leading, this idea that the elder is the leader. And then similar, just as the Old Testament elder was the basis of what the New Testament elder looked like. Same thing goes for the pastor, or in this case the Levite. They used kind of the Old Testament view or responsibilities of pastor and used that as the basis of the responsibilities for a New Testament pastor. When I say New Testament pastor, it means the roles that the early church leaders were fulfilling. And again, you can look at this. If you go all the way back to the Old Testament in Deuteronomy, you can chapter 17, verses 8 through 13, and then 21, or chapter 21, verse 5. You get this idea of what the Old Testament pastor was doing and what the responsibilities was, and then you jump to 1 Chronicles, chapter 23, verses 3 through 4. Again, getting an idea of what this pastor role looks like, and those 2 being 2 separate things. Eldership and pastoral responsibilities are 2 different things. Where again, as the 2 office view views eldership and pastor is almost interchangeable. Another word that you can use for pastor is overseer and elder, and they're all kind of interchangeable, working, doing the same things. Again, finding this stuff extremely interesting, and like I said, got on a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's all fun. But then second question, where in the Bible does it refer to deacons, priests, pastors, elders, and bishops? Once again, doing more research. I think Paul's letters are just riddled with these terms, with these titles. And as you read Paul's letters, you start to get an idea of kind of, where the basis of these responsibilities are coming from. Elders are mentioned multiple times throughout the letters that Paul wrote. Mentioned in Acts chapter 14, verses 23, and then which says, "And when they had appointed the elders for them in every church with prayer and fasting, they committed them to the Lord in whom they had believed." And then deacons being mentioned in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 18 through 13, giving kind of the requirements of what a deacon is to do. A deacon likewise must be dignified, not double-tongued, not addicted to much wine, not greedy and dishonest in gain. They must hold the mastery of the faith with a clear conscience. And it goes on to talk again more about what the qualifications of a deacon are. And then a few more verses that the term elder is mentioned in is Titus chapter 1, verses 5 talks a lot about this. And then Titus 1 chapter 5 says this is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained in order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. And again, elders and overseers in this case being interchangeable with again that term overseer in verse 7 as you continue to read Titus. And then 1 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 through 7 starts out by saying this: the saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, again interchangeable with the word elder, he desires a noble task. Therefore an overseer or elder must be approved, reproach the husband of one wife, again listing more and more responsibilities, similar to what a deacon is to hold. And yeah, that's what 1 Timothy chapter 3 1 through 7 is talking about. And then sorry, I have a laundry list of where these things pop up in Paul's letters, and I think again just as an testament to the importance of church leadership and the hierarchy within the church that is happening. And then to kind of talk about, as I'm saying this, the second part of our second question: does your church recognize these three orders of church leaderships today? The only one that I felt very unfamiliar with, and honestly was a little hesitant to, and it's because I grew up in Mesa, Arizona, and if you don't know, Mesa, Arizona has a very heavy LDS population, is bishops. I was not familiar with bishops at all, what the role of a bishop was, and again, after doing a little more research, kind of understanding the root of the word bishop, my church, I don't think we would say that we have bishops. Now, do we have elders? Yes. Do we have deacons? Yes. We don't use the term deacon per se. Again, I think a lot, especially deacons, again, growing up just kind of around different religions, deacons is something that I kind of associate with the Catholic Church, which makes sense because of last week we were talking about the origins of the Catholic Church and how so many of the aspects of the Catholic Church are foundational to Christianity. But when I say our church has deacons, deacons is translated to servant or server. And yes, we have volunteers, and I would consider them deacons by definition. And then elders, again, we have elders. We have a board who would be considered elders. And again, this is another term that is kind of a buzzword in the LDS church. But again, these are just leaders of the church. Now, for the church that I attend, elders are working in the background, so to say. They're not necessarily pastors. They aren't the ones who are teaching on Sunday mornings. They're not the ones who are doing personal ministry. Not to say that they don't do that, but it's not their primary role. Whereas the pastors at my church are the ones who are doing those duties. And so I guess now that I'm thinking about it and saying these things out loud, we would have a 3-office view of church leadership. So yeah, making discoveries as I talk. And then question 3, before this course, what was your understanding / experience of church leadership? I had a very brief understanding. Again, reading through Paul's letters kind of multiple times, you often run into these verses that I mentioned, and they talk about the requirements of deacons or talk about the requirements of elders, and had a basic understanding of what their roles were. But again, getting into the weeds a little bit more, understanding the differences between an elder, a pastor, and a deacon, kind of helps me understand really what the hierarchy is and what church leadership is made up of, which is super insightful now working for a church and kind of living this life and having conversations about church health and the people who are making decisions. It's good to have the biblical basis of why we have the structure we have, and not in a way to like challenge the current structure that we have. I don't think it's necessarily broken. Are there things that we need to improve? Yeah, probably. I think all churches are that way, but it's good to have that scriptural basis, that foundation of why we have the positions that we have currently today. And then question 4, has what you are learning this week caused you to think more deeply or even change your opinion about the topic? And like I said, I think I would love to continue to dive into a little bit more of the nuances between the two views of the 2-office structure and the 3-office structure, and kind of understand what is true, if that's the word that you want to use, or what is more accurate to scripture. Like I said, I'll continue to kind of get into that a little bit more when I have time, but I think that it's definitely caused me to think a little more deeply, and not just glance over and not really ask any questions about why we have the leadership that we have, or the leadership structure that we have within the church that I attend. But then 2, I want to know more about just different structures that other churches have that we have partnerships with, or I want to ask my friends now, like, what does your church do? Just to get more of a perspective and to understand why churches decide to do what they do. I think it's important for us to be having those conversations as church leaders, so that we can continue to learn and understand and support however we can. I don't think it necessarily changed an opinion I had about the topic. I think that it's funny because as I began to read through some of these things, I listened to a podcast a while ago from Bridgetown Church talking about why they have women in elder roles, and that is, again, another rabbit trail that I don't have time to talk about because I'm already going longer than I wanted to. But specifically on the structure, I don't think it changed really my opinion on the structure. I think it's pretty clear from Paul, his instructions to us today in 2024 of, this is how the church is designed to be structured as far as leadership goes. And I think it's important that we continue to uphold that structure and implement that structure, because it's clearly working. Now, are the people that are in those positions always the healthiest? No, and that's when we see things fail. But I think the structure itself is pretty healthy, and it's not one person making all the decisions, and there's a process in which decisions are made, and there's steps that you have to go through, and you have multiple perspectives looking at one topic. And I think it's super important that we continue to have those things within our churches as we continue to navigate just the craziness of the world today. So those are my thoughts. I'm excited to hear about what you guys think, and look forward to talking to you guys in the discussion post. We'll see you later.